Welcome, everyone. My name's Dave Zapponi, and I'm the CEO of ECHO, otherwise known as the Educational Council of Homeowners. I want to thank you all for coming today. And our conversation today is on tree care and defensible space. It's a community conversation, so it's available to everyone free of charge. And thanks to our sponsors. ECHO is a statewide nonprofit association established to support HOA board members and engaged homeowners. Our mission is to foster a better quality of life in community associations through education, advocacy, and networking. For today's event, we have a few housekeeping items. These are now presented on your screen. You want to take a quick look at those. We appreciate it. In addition, slides will be sent to all who have registered in advance for this event. We'll have all your emails, so we'll be sending it to you within about 7 to 10 days of the program after we do some editing. Please take a moment to review our housekeeping items. And I also want to let you know that we do use the chat icon. It's to be used to report technical issues and to communicate directly with other participants. That's to communicate directly with other participants in the webinar or to the speakers. You can place your questions in the Q&A feature. I'll be monitoring that as we go along here. I will try to answer some of the questions during the presentations, or we may answer questions during the Q&A period at the end of the webinar. Questions about specific situations are better to ask of the attorney or your expert service provider that's on site for your communities or another appropriate professional familiar with your situation. Now, let me direct your attention to to your monitors, where you'll find our disclaimer. None of what is said during the seminar shall be construed as specific legal or expert advice from the speakers, sponsors, or ECHO. If you wish specific advice, we encourage you to contact your attorney or another suitable expert. The information we provide during this webinar is educational in nature and should not be relied upon for specific decision-making purposes. Thank you for that. This event, as well as all of our events, is made possible by the generous contributions of our professional service providers. They sponsor our programming. Class fees today help support the development costs of our educational programs and defray some of our production expenses. Actually, there were no fees, so it doesn't cost anything, so it's not going to do that. But thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our sponsors today. Our question and answer sponsors are Associa Management Company and CID Consortium LLC. Please support all ECHO professional members and especially our sponsors. They make our educational programming possible at little or no cost to you. And now a bit about today's speaker. Kate LeGros is an urban forest manager at A Plus Tree LLC, where she helps steward and care for the urban forest canopies across fire-prone regions of San Francisco Bay Area, including Marin and the peninsula. With over a decade of arboriculture experience and a background in environmental science, Kate brings deep expertise in defensible space planning, wildfire risk mitigation, and vegetation management in high-risk zones. Kate is a trusted resource for communities navigating the intersection of climate change, complex vegetation clearance standards, and increasing insurance scrutiny. She works closely with property managers, HOAs, and Firewise communities to develop science-based, actionable plans that prioritize safety without sacrificing landscape value. Kate's leadership is rooted in both technical expertise and a passion for engaging the next generation of environmental stewards, making her a strong advocate for community-driven solutions in face of wildfire risks. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this over to Kate, and welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Dave and Connor. I did not write that bio about myself, so that was a great introduction. Thank you. I'm super excited to be with everyone today. My title as urban forest manager basically just means I work with different HOAs and boards to educate them on tree care and provide uh, educational material to execute tree care and defensible space projects. So what we're going to be discussing today is a marriage between good tree care practices and defensible space against wildfire. I mentioned just this. So, tree care practices would be anything from tree trimming, tree removals and replacements, and healthcare such as soil treatments, any sort of pest or disease management. And then we will discuss defensible space projects that individual homeowners can execute, but really kind of scaling out and looking at a larger HOA responsibility defensible space project. So keeping it very basic with tree trimming, right? We always have to trim trees for building clearance, clearance from roadways, clearance from walkways. That's your minimum. Now, these standards here are to consider keeping the branches away from a home so that fire wouldn't be able to travel or jump from a tree to a home, but also for other things like, pests like squirrels or rodents crawling from a tree to a home and really just making sure that that does have proper clearance. 14 feet clearance from roadways is really considering our emergency vehicles. While it would be great for, the Amazon delivery truck to be able to get down the driveway, it is more considering for uh, fire trucks, ambulance, emergency vehicles, so that if there is a fire in your HOA, they do have proper entrance and they can combat that fire. And walkways, of course, we at least need 8 feet, unless there's a really tall person in your neighborhood, just so when people are walking or in the event of a fire having to evacuate, there's not risk of limbs hitting anyone in the head. A crown clean is a practice where we are removing dead branches from trees. This would be any branch that's larger than about 2 inches in diameter. And a lot of my clients are concerned about smaller twigs and, smaller branches in the crowns of trees. But really, if those were to fall, they're not posing risk of damage to anyone's property or a vehicle. We are really industry standard looking for 2 inch diameter branches. And this is for safety concerns as well as, if a branch were to fall, but then if a branch were to fall, that could then impact the rest of a healthy crown. So getting out any sort of dead wood from a tree is a good practice to consider. And then here are some more comprehensive pruning, such as a crown reduction. A crown reduction would be pruning not just the tops and the sides and removing the dead wood, but making sure that it does have an overall healthy, balanced crown and focused on end weight reduction. A lot of different species require different pruning practices based on that species need, but crown reductions are most appropriate for like oak trees. That would be kind of similar to an image that you see here. And then structural pruning is a pruning practice which focuses on selecting the major leaders of a younger tree. This is best done probably 3 to 6 years after a tree is planted and established, so that we are selecting, the central leader of a tree, making sure there's no competing or crossing branches, so that as that tree matures and grows, we're not having to go back in and do corrective cuts as the tree is getting older. This is nice to establish when they're younger so that we don't, have to go in and do annual pruning. We are thinking about, the next 10, 15 years of a tree. Here's some examples of structural pruning. Some of these are definitely the preferred options. On the top level here, you'll see how to correctly prune. And this would definitely be best done by an arborist or a tree care vendor that is being hired by the HOA. I would not really recommend any homeowners to do work like this. But it is thinking for the long-term care, and this is best applied to younger trees. Here are some photos of a before and after in a crown reduction and crown thinning. In general, you don't want to be pruning more than 20 to 25% of the crown. This is an industry standard um, spec, and really when you stand at the base of a tree, being able to look up and see some blue sky is a good thing. That allows wind to travel through the crown of a tree. Being able to see a healthy, balanced crown, and reducing any sort of flags that are sticking out that could potentially be causing end weight, meaning any branches that are more vertical could go like more horizontal. Keeping them nice and balanced is a really good practice. These are some very basic pruning specs that we do recommend all of our HOAs consider. Number one, making sure that your contractor is licensed and insured. Right here it says a Class D49 license, but we actually do need to update that to say Class B49 license. There was a change last year. The D49 license is a broader licensing in the state of California. And then the C49 is specific for tree trimming and palm trimmers. So be sure to make note of that. Another thing that your tree care contractor should definitely be paying attention to is pruning to the industry standards, which are listed on the ANSI A300. And that is a tree care industry wide initiative, and that is international. Good practices include taking smaller cuts, removing smaller branches, and avoiding doing really large cuts. In general, I do not advise my clients to take more than about 8 inches diameter cut. Anything larger than that could stress out the tree, and when trees are stressed, they tend to become more vulnerable to disease and pest attacks. So making sure that when you are pruning your trees, proper cuts are being made. And then also making sure that even during pruning, that trees have good access to irrigation, whether that's hand watering or sprinkler system, and then making sure that they have healthy soils and good mulch, which we'll get into a little bit later. One thing that I would never recommend is just pruning because you feel like the tree needs to be pruned. Getting an arborist perspective, a professional opinion, to really analyze the structure of the tree, the health of the tree, and making sure that there is a good reason to prune, and not just because, a board member doesn't necessarily like the shape of a tree, but understanding why is the tree shaped that way, is it its natural shape, and making sure that you have a valid reason, such as clearance pruning or deadwood removal. As I mentioned, definitely don't take more than 25% of live foliage during pruning, and some outdated pruning practices, including topping trees, which would be cutting straight across. We definitely don't recommend doing that anymore. And we don't recommend stripping out the interior foliage, which is called lion's tailing. With all of my HOAs, I am really discussing the long-term sustainability of not only their trees, but also their budget, right? A lot of my HOA clients may have a specific tree care budget set. And when we begin our relationship, I need to understand how much they have and how much of that can we actually allocate towards priority needs. Right now, I would say the top priority needs for trees would definitely be removing any dead trees since those pose hazard, pruning for safety and building clearance away from homes, and then also looking at defensible space against wildfire, which we will get into in a little bit. And then another thing that is really critical to discuss with your arborist and tree care vendor is how much do we need to budget for the coming years? Trees are living creatures, right? They can change very, very quickly. If, let's say, irrigation gets cut off, they can die at a rapid speed. So, knowing what needs to be done in a comprehensive ecosystem way with irrigation, soil management, tree pruning for the long-term care of the trees. It is good to have a 3 to 5 year maintenance plan in mind or budget plan in mind. But since trees can change so quickly, you generally need to have your HOA inspected at least once a year. A lot of my clients that have specific issues, I'm looking at the trees twice a year to make sure that things are still healthy and that the treatments that we have done are still effective. My HOAs that I work with are really great with having due diligence and records. We always recommend that your tree care vendor is keeping written records, any sort of uh, inventory system, photos, maps, and a record of what work is being recommended, and then a record of what work is actually being executed, right? Your arborist can recommend like a very comprehensive scope of work for pruning, healthcare, pest management. But maybe the budget only allows for those priority items like pruning to be done. So knowing the difference between what was discussed and then what was actually executed is going to be critical going forward. This is going to be most helpful for insurance. If a tree were to fall down, you have the records to discuss that the proper maintenance has been done. The tree has been pruned in the past and we have photos. You can, of course, submit those to the insurance company if damages were to occur and file a claim to get any sort of reimbursement or have the claim paid out. And then making sure that um, with defensible space care, tree pruning and then also vegetation management could potentially be something that you're submitting all of the work that has been done for your HOA to your insurance carrier, or if you were applying for new insurance, to show them these are all the proactive steps that we've been taking. So before and after pictures are really critical. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the history of fire in California. So, fire is a natural ecosystem process throughout the state of California. It may not seem that way now because we have been under a system of fire suppression for about the last 100 years. But prior to like I would say 1910, lightning at higher elevations would cause wildfires to break out in the Sierra Nevada. That would basically, the fire would move through the forest, eliminating all the smaller and fine fuels, and it would allow a healthy forest to exist by removing the built up vegetation. We see examples in the giant sequoia groves, south of Yosemite that show a frequent fire history about every 10 to 15 years occurring. And then we also have a couple ecosystems that are fire dependent. In the eastern Sierras, we have the pine ecosystem. And then in Southern California, we have actually a fire adapted ecosystem of chaparral. Now, besides the natural fires starting through lightning, we also know that Indigenous people throughout California have used fire as a management tool throughout time, basically igniting fires in grasslands to either attract animals like deer that will then come eat the new grass, which was a food source, or to actually clear out the area of the land in order to like occupy that area. So, all that being said, why are we having such bad wildfires in California now, right? That's like the million-dollar question. And there's a lot of different reasons. But one reason is there has been a culture of fire suppression over about the last 100 years. In 1910, in Idaho and Montana, I believe, there was a devastating wildfire that burned 3 million acres in 2 days. It also claimed about 90 people's lives, and most of them were firefighters in the newly established Forest Service. The Forest Service had only been around for about 5 years at this point, and so this was just absolutely devastating to the employees of the Forest Service and the firefighters. Um, what happened after that is a lot of the surviving firefighters then ended up moving to California and establishing, a culture of as soon as a fire starts, we must suppress it because of the risk of, a devastating fire. So what developed from there is fires would start naturally, and instead of allowing the natural process of them burning through an overgrown forest, um, they were put out right away. So that is one key point to kind of figure out what has happened over the years. With trees and fire, and especially in our urban forests where we're in the wildland urban interface with our HOAs backing into natural areas, parks, hillsides, or even mountains, one area of concern is eucalyptus. There is a lot of misinformation about eucalyptus trees, unfortunately. People do have a negative connotation with them that they just need to be cut down right away for any reason. But there are sustainable practices that can be done in order to maintain the eucalyptus. But the reason they get so much hate is because they're very fast growing, right? They have very flammable oils both in the leaves and in the bark of the trees, and they tend to sprout very quickly. So if you have a grove of eucalyptus, they will drop all their leaves and seeds, and they'll just continue to grow. So they're very difficult to manage, but it is something that I think over time we will start to see an improved vegetation management around eucalyptus trees. One way to do that is to address the smaller suckers. So the photo on the left shows all these suckers were just sprouting up beneath mature eucalyptus trees. And so the client's goal here was to maintain the mature trees that had been around for, over 70 years, and they were worried about fire starting and spreading up into the crown. So, just taking out those smaller eucalyptus trees and managing those stumps so they don't resprout. On the right here, you can see the stumps, and you can actually see in the background that some of the stumps are actually resprouting, right? So eucalyptus are very resilient. They once you cut them down, those stumps really want to resprout and keep growing. So it takes continued maintenance of them. That can be in partnership. The arborist vendor is removing the suckers, and then the landscapers are monitoring the sprouts, making sure they're not resprouting. And if they are, they can just whack those with a weed whacker or brush cutter. More on stumps. The most effective way to remove a stump that is prone to resprouting would definitely be stump grinding and root grinding. Um, I would say eucalyptus is definitely one of the most difficult stumps to remove, or they're the most resilient. The stumps will pretty much always resprout. But getting in with a stump grinder, which basically has a really large blade on the front and it can go down even several feet if it's cleared from any sort of underground utilities, and grinding out all of that material is going to be critical. Other options do exist. The efficacy of these really depend on how quickly it's applied, but one effective treatment is herbicide, and that would be a spot herbicide. So just treating the stump that was cut, not doing any sort of broadcast spraying or, anything that could be drift in wind or runoff in rain, but doing a removal and doing effective herbicide stump treatment does have a good success rate from preventing stumps from resprouting, as well as, and this one's a little bit more crafty, but taking very thick black plastic bags and actually tarping that stump and pinning it down with, gardening pins to prevent any sort of sunlight infiltration to the stump. Um, basically, the stump is only regrowing when photosynthesis is able to happen. So, if you were to do any one of these, you would see good success. But, starting with stump grinding and kind of seeing what happens from there is critical. And your tree care provider would know more all about this. Another more intensive management option for defensible space against wildfire would be considered mastication. This is definitely something that a tree care provider or a landscape manager would be responsible for. Uh, it's a larger piece of equipment similar to the stump grinder, but it's more like a skid steer, and it has a large blade on the front, and it is driven through natural areas, and it is able to remove or mow down a large area of land. So this is the same tree. So this is the before and the after. The client's goal here was really to remove all of those ladder fuels from the ground level up into the crown of the tree so that in the event of a wildfire, or yeah, a wildfire on the ground, it's not climbing up into the grove. Just on the ridge in the background is where my client's HOA is located. So this forest was their responsibility to manage, and this is definitely a more intensive practice in order to prevent wildfire from spreading. Another species of concern are our beautiful palm trees, right? So palm trees are considered a grass, actually. We won't get too much into that, but they do consistently produce at least one dead round of fronds per year, sometimes two or three sets of dead fronds. But when they're growing, they're sticking straight up out of our landscapes. They're almost acting like flags in the sky. So, in the event of a wildfire, most fire is spread through embers flying through the air, and we're concerned with our palm trees acting as a flag, and an ember comes along, hits that flag, and if there's dead fronds, it can ignite. Now, any species of tree is susceptible to fire and can ignite, but with the combination of the way that these grow straight up, very high in the air, and the way that they're consistently producing fronds, it is a major concern for the spread of wildfire. What's great is that doing once or twice a year palm frond removal is a great way to prevent that dead buildup of debris. Another thing is that some palm species also have very shaggy bark, and that can be skinned and removed as well. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the way wildfire behaves. This is something that I think is really important to consider, not only as a single homeowner perspective, but also within your HOA, your neighborhoods, your communities, and surrounding HOAs to kind of get an understanding of if a fire were to come from any direction, any perspective, how could it possibly move and impact our communities? So fire behaves in three different ways, or three different factors impact fire behavior. The first is topography. So that would be slope, hills. Is your HOA located at the top of a mountain, in a canyon? Where are you located? The second being weather. So considering wind speed, relative humidity of vegetation and temperature. And then lastly is fuel. If a fire were to start, what fuel would it be able to consume? And that's including vegetation, everything from grasses and shrubs to trees to downed logs and built up debris, but also, unfortunately, homes, right? Any sort of built structure, no matter what the material, that's considered a fuel. As disturbing as that sounds, it is the reality is we need to be aware of what the homes are made out of and the proximity to vegetation that could be spreading wildfire. Now, while we can't control topography and we can't control weather, we can control fuel loads. So, in fire research, fuel is kind of considered 1 hour fuel, 10-hour fuel, 100-hour fuel. And the 1 hour fuels are your smallest fuel. That is blades of grass, that is pine needles, any sort of debris that is very small and could burn in 1 hour. From the point of ignition to the point of being completely burned, that's a 1 hour fuel. A 10-hour fuel is a little bit bigger. That would be sticks, shrubs, or maybe more built up vegetation. And then your 100-hour fuels would be even larger logs, trees, and those really are not a huge concern for ignition. So the number one concern for our ignition is in vegetation, all that fine 1-hour fuels. So the best way to combat the risk of wildfire starting in those 1-hour fuels, besides pruning your trees, is going to be vegetation management, making sure your gutters are cleared, making sure there's not an excess of built up leaf material or grasses. And that's going to be really within the first 5 feet, which I will share a little bit more of now. Oh, well, I guess before that, this statistic saying 90% of homes are home ignitions in wildfire is caused by embers flying, right? So the fire can be miles away, but if the winds are high and they're picking up ember and they're picking up the vegetation debris going into the air, that can fly and ignite anywhere. So that's how the spot fires are starting. And really, that is a huge concern throughout the Western United States and beyond. But really, I think we're looking um, in the Western United States. So now let's discuss some defensible space against wildfire. This is really critical and science-backed information on how to combat wildfire. Zone 0 is the most critical space right now. It is 0 to 5 feet from a home. I also want to let you know that Zone 0 also is your home, and any built structure attached to your home, such as a carport, a garage, or a deck. But since I am working just with trees, I am going to just focus on that vegetation management aspect. But all of this information can be found on Firewise community websites, CAL FIRE, anything like that, that would go more into your built home. Um, so 0 to 5 feet, the standard now is really not having any flammable material within that 0 to 5 feet. And why is that? So if an ember is flying across and it hits the roof or an eaves or the siding of your home and it drops to the ground, we want to make sure there's nothing there that could ignite. So no vegetation, no mulching. And I definitely know clients that have done beautiful landscaping within these 5 feet from their homes, but now our standard of management has just changed. So it will require projects over time, removing that vegetation and pulling any sort of vegetation back to at least 5 feet away from your home. Zone 1 is going to be considered 5 to 30 feet. That is something that is going to be trees properly pruned and spaced apart from each other. Any sort of dead trees do need to be removed. Trees need to be raised up at least 8 to 12 feet so that if there was a ground fire, we have, you know, that vertical space to prevent it from going into the crown, and making sure that things are properly cared for in that space. So vertical and horizontal pruning. And then zone 2 is 30 to 100 feet away from your home. A lot of my clients, that's going to include other homes. That's going to potentially include neighbors at another HOA. So making sure that there is good open communication on proper tree care practices, vegetation management practices, and calling in the other owners. Like, let's work together to care for our trees in a way that is sustainable, and making sure that things are mowed at least on an annual basis. Like grasses should be mowed, bushes should be trimmed. We don't want to see a continuous um, wall of any sort of vegetation. It needs to have breaks into it. A little recap. 5 feet from your home, really not having any sort of flammable material. There's some really good examples of defensible space landscaping online that show moving from mulch to maybe a more like Zen gravel landscaping style. I would definitely recommend looking into that. 30 feet from your home, you should also not have built up vegetation or any sort of mulch or wood to be stored, and then really just pruning and making sure things have nice open space. Looking at the slope of your property is going to be critical in determining how much spacing does need to occur. I would definitely recommend kind of leaving this to the professionals who have experience in defensible space projects because there are certain species that may be protected. Some species, especially shrubs and trees, they're home to nesting birds, right? So we need to either have a good understanding of which species of trees and shrubs can be trimmed and removed, or we do need to have a wildlife biologist come on site and make sure that none of these areas are actively nesting, right? As a tree care professional, I am a huge bird advocate, and unfortunately, half of the bird nesting season aligns with wildfire season. Bird nesting season in Northern California wraps up at the end of August, but that's several months into wildfire season. So, calling in the professionals, making sure they are doing inspections, especially in these more natural areas during bird nesting season is going to be critical. Um, but, understanding what the priorities are for vegetation management, distancing, spacing, and then, of course, considering the slope itself. If your HOA is at the bottom of a hill or mountain, you are actually less at risk for wildfire spreading because fire usually travels uphill. So that is something to keep in mind, but that does not excuse not doing defensible space projects because of the embers, right? Even if the fire is at the top of the mountain or the top of the hill, embers can fly downhill. On a larger scale, with Firewise communities, this is something that each HOA can work to become certified on or work with their local fire department to take the proper precautions to become certified. But it really is something we're seeing happen more so on a town or city level, where a whole town will become Firewise certified, meaning that they've taken the proper precautions at a structure level and a vegetation management level in order to become more defensible against wildfire. And it does take each homeowner. It's not just like one person can do this, it's a community-wide initiative to become more fire resilient. The Firewise USA program, I would really encourage everyone to look into. In my area, which is the Bay Area, I am active with San Mateo Firewise and Marin Firewise groups, which educate homeowners and HOAs about the specific concerns and the action items that need to be taken. They have employees and they have staff that would be able to like come out and do assessments for you, to say like these are three things that this HOA could get done on a community level in order to help make the entire HOA more defensible against wildfire. But some general recommendations would be working with your neighbors that might not have access to the resources to execute any sort of projects. These might be coming together on a community initiative, maybe an HOA day of service where you're going to help a specific homeowner who might not be able to do it clear back vegetation or cut the grass around their home or something that might just be a little bit more of a community initiative. And I think that that's most successful when the conversation is starting early and allowing all the homeowners to be an active voice on what they are interested in doing on a community level versus hiring a vendor or an arborist to get some work done. I don't like the situation of like everyone's participating, and then there's a couple homeowners that really don't want to participate because this is a community. We all have to work together. So it's going to be up to having good conversations and making sure that we're able to kind of compromise on a plan forward. Because we're all at risk for wildfires, so making sure that conversation is starting early. This could even be something that you're having a special meeting on, and making sure that you do have your management team on involved as well. Um, Other things to consider that are not really vegetation management based would be having your go bag, having your emergency pack ready to go in the event that a wildfire does come. You're ready to evacuate quickly. And it's not just for the people in your house, but it's also for the animals, right? Making sure your pets are ready to go, making sure that you are in good contact with your neighbors. You have several phone numbers for them if someone's not home. You know how to help them, evacuate a pet, or maybe someone that doesn't have good accessibility and does need assistance getting out of the house. And then making sure you do know your evacuation route, because several HOAs I work with, they are cul-de-sacs, right? They're huge cul-de-sacs. But then imagine if everyone is trying to evacuate at one time. How are you going to go about doing that safely, and making sure that there's probably a fire lane or another point of access to get out that people might not be aware of. So this is not tree related, but it is really critical for everyone to be aware of, um, just to kind of keep the conversation going. Uh, the preventative work, vegetation management, what are we going to do? And then, hey, these are our emergency preparedness items to get ready. So I feel like I just flew through that, but I would love to hear from anyone with questions specific to the presentation. I can go back and kind of bounce through specific slides. And
Okay,
then my
Kate.
contact information is here as well.
Okay, Kate. So let me get through the Q&A announcements. And so we want to say thank you to our Q&A sponsors, who are Associa and CID Consortium, LLC. So thank you to them for providing us support for today's Q&A session. And I'm going to ask people to go to the Q&A feature to put your questions in the Q&A feature. And in there, if you could take a look at the questions and put a thumbs up. There's a little icon on your screen, a little thumbs up guy, that you can click on to vote for your favorite, so that we can start with your favorites, and we'll go down the list there. And for Kate, up in the right-hand corner, you'll see that there is recents and most upvotes. There's a little caret there that says recents. Hit the
Mhm.
caret and you'll be able to pick most upvotes, and then we can start from the beginning. And I'll go ahead and monitor this. We'll go through there. One thing I would like you to do while people are looking at the questions or putting questions in there is I would like you to look at slide number 20 really quickly, if you could. It's eucalyptus mastication and the work that was done there. I find that to be really interesting. And those of us in Southern California, we have a lot of slope stability issues. And you can see they removed most of the vegetation under the trees, so that, and it's a pretty steep slope. I would be really nervous about doing that, and just thought, I'd give you a chance to answer that, or at least address that while people are looking at their questions. I know we really do have a problem, and if we take any vegetation off our slopes, things are gonna go downhill in a hurry. So, yeah, and
Yeah, it's definitely going to be ecosystem specific, right? So in Southern California, I'm thinking like Chaparral, hillsides just above HOAs. This being a eucalyptus grove, the slope, it's a little deceiving. I don't think it's as steep as it looks, but everything has held in place due to the larger tree root systems being established.
Mhm.
And this was not upslope from any sort of home or structure. This is downslope from the HOA. So there was no risk of any landslide occurring, but this would be something that having the tree care provider and then any sort of engineering team as well would be really critical to discuss doing any sort of large term vegetation
Mhm.
management. But all of this smaller stuff, it was uh, like finer fuel and it wasn't holding the soil in place like these larger trees. If these larger trees were completely removed and this was a bare hillside, I would feel very differently. Not having any living material here does put it at risk for landslides in the event of like large rains coming. Um, but this was several years, this was about 5 years ago that we did this project, and it has held up successfully by doing the larger scale vegetation removal that then allowed a landscaping team to come in and manage that understory and mid-story levels to
Mhm.
prevent it being kind of like a wall of vegetation. So.
Do the roots, once you say you were to top some of these trees, just cut them down, the leaving the root system in the ground, is that advisable? That stabilizes the soil. Does it stable? How long does it stabilize, and does the root system eventually just rot? And
No, definitely keeping the roots in the soil on slope where appropriate is great. I don't see it needing to be removed unless you were actually doing some sort of replanting there.
hmm
And then some of these are eucalyptus, so that would be something that, maintaining those resprouting stumps if they are resprouting, just so that you don't have another eucalyptus grow back. But in time, roots do decay naturally, and all the critters in the soil sure love that, love to eat that. But um, keeping things stabilized is going to be critical, especially in Southern California, which is a little bit different ecosystem than this.
Okay, that sounds good. So let's go ahead and go to the Q&A feature here and the most up votes. And I see, oh, Kay Dyack, regular with us. Kay asks, it is my understanding that 5 feet from a building and 10 feet from the roof, that's I guess
Yeah.
the zone. Please confirm that this is 3 and 5 feet.
Okay, you're correct. It's 5 feet and 10 feet. This is like tree standards, but in terms of fire, we have to have that 5 foot clearance from the siding, 10 foot from the roof, and 10 foot from a chimney. So I definitely will get this changed so that when I'm talking about fire, this is the same. It should be the same.
Okay, sounds good. And then John Rickard asks another question here regarding tree health. Most tree service firms don't use sealants when they when they sever large
Mhm.
limbs from otherwise healthy trees. Arborists say this invites pests into the interior of the trunk, which turns it into a potential charcoal bin. Is that statement true or correct?
Yeah, I would definitely say that's true. I don't know any modern arborists that are using sealants to cover any sort of cuts. If you have to take a cut from a tree that's significantly large, you need to maybe evaluate, is the tree even healthy or stable enough to remain on the landscape? And then the sealants, yeah, they do kind of promote uh they can promote pests attacking any sort of diseases and like harboring rot. Healthy trees, when pruned properly, should be able to compartmentalize that cut, meaning heal over, and continue growing. So it is not a recommended practice
What's not the recommended practice?
using a sealant.
Using a sealant. Okay.
Mhm.
And so here we have an anonymous attendee asks, and with 8 votes, do municipalities typically have regulations concerning how close trees may be planted next to a fence or property lines and or buildings? What's the regulation around this?
So that's going to be a great thing to talk to your municipality's arborist if they have one on site, or Department of Public Works, because it will vary per town and city. What I know is kind of a popular topic right now is that the city of Berkeley just passed defensible space measures and vegetation management requirements. And then, certain municipalities are just recommending a very basic, like, oh, follow CAL FIRE's recommendations. So they don't have a specific, like, legal guidance there, but that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that they won't in the future. So just because, a municipality isn't requiring it doesn't mean that it's not a good idea to start working on it now.
So are you familiar with 1572, the non-functional turf bill? And having trees on.
Yeah, just a very basic level.
Okay, so I won't ask that question, but yeah,
Sure.
I'm curious because one of the provisions in the bill was to allow, it's considered functional turf if you have a tree on a non-functional turf area. And so there's a certain formula that you use, but if it's not your area, it's fine. Um, now, here's another one slipped in here from Anonymous again. Is there a clearance requirement or suggestion for fence, wooden, let's see, many of our homes have trees within 5 feet and a business within 2 feet of a wooden fence.
Mhm.
So you know what the regs on that?
I do. So Cal Fire, just kind of being like the overarching resource, is recommending that if your wood fence actually touches the siding of your home, no matter the material of your home, that wooden fence is considered a part of your structure. So the general recommendation now is to change your wooden fence within the first 5 feet of your home to a metal fence. And then all the trees, let's say your fence is going out, the wooden fence 20 feet away from the home, just making sure that that tree is trimmed up at least 8 feet from the ground, and that would probably be needing to be pruned up 6 feet from the top of the fence to the crown of the tree, so the base of the tree.
Mhm.
And then the bushes question, bushes do need to be cleared. If the wooden fence is touching the side of the home, at least 5 feet. But a good way to get around that is to, instead of doing all of that work, actually just change the first 5 feet of your fencing, which maybe doesn't look so fabulous, but it is the recommendation right now.
Okay, sounds good. So let's go with the next one. We're 7 upvotes from Marcia Metre. We have do these standards apply equally to CAL FIRE high risk East Bay zones as well as their low risk zones like San Francisco?
That's a great question. So these standards apply everywhere. It's high risk is considering where fire will most likely occur. They don't have a prediction device to say exactly, but looking at the fire behavior models that do exist for weather, topography, and fuel, they can determine, East Bay areas are more high risk. And so
Mhm.
CAL FIRE will typically have their resources ready to go, and they're better resourced in East Bay areas. And it's, let's say San Francisco being low risk because we don't have like the continuous vegetation or the hills, and the fog puts us at low risk, but it's still wise to just take the proper precautions and be ready. However, San Francisco is not considered, unless you're getting closer to like Daly City, for example. Um, my neighborhood, like the Western Addition, is not considered like a wildland urban interface. So because we're not directly going into that wildland urban interface, we're not at a high risk. But if you cross the bridge into Marin or East Bay, anything like that, um, definitely CAL FIRE is taking more of their resources to prepare for a fire there.
Okay, sounds good. Um, Next question here is I'm gonna it's from Deb Gordon, and Deb says or asked, why do you not recommend topping a tree?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Topping a tree is like a pretty outdated practice at this point, which would actually just be completely cutting off the top of a tree to either keep it at a smaller size or maybe to try to get any sort of view. Um, and I would be happy, I don't have it on me, unfortunately, but share some photos of like topping versus doing a complete prune or selective pruning or a vista prune, which all have specific reasons. But some of my clients, you know, they ask to top a tree, which would be to completely reduce it in size. And then we look at things like, would that be efficient for this species? A lot of species, when you cut them from the top, they have a very aggressive reactionary grow back. So that specific cut will come back with, 10 more shoots shooting off, attempting to grow even faster. Um, but then some species, they would just be better suited to reduce from the top, do a crown reduction from the top, the sides, and then let's say it's to maybe get a view, a vista prune, then you can selectively prune certain branches and thin it out so that you have a better view without just cutting, with any sort of reason or like determination of the branches. So another thing to consider is a lot of these trees that are topped, they're very fast growing, so they have to be consistently topped, sometimes annually to maintain that size. And it would be more cost effective to actually do a removal and replacement project. So removing this fast growing tree that may be too large and replacing it with a smaller, more suitable species for the location.
Okay, sounds good. You say vista prune, does that mean like you're doing venting so people can see through and you're not getting too much wind?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's exactly right. So vista pruning is it's not a tree-centered perspective. It's more of a human-centered perspective of pruning where, let's say a home had a really important view of the bay and the tree has grown to take up that entire vista, and now that's impacting property value, happiness of the owners, things like that. So arborists can work with an owner to compromise and figure out we can reduce it by however many feet, and then we can create windows and open it up, which will then allow the tree to remain on site and be safe and healthy while still maintaining the property value of a home.
Okay, so here's a good question. We get this all the time, and it's got a couple of people that have answered it. But if extensive work needs to be done over the next, say, 3 to 5 years, is there a position similar to a construction or project manager for landscaping? This person would be independent from the tree firm and actually manage the projects, draft RFPs, secure bids, review invoices, etc. Sounds very logical to me to have this kind of, I'm sure you can find it, but what are your thoughts?
I mean, absolutely. There's a couple new like budding careers in this field. One would be a certified wildfire mitigation specialist. These are people that usually work for fire departments or private companies, but I think that there's probably some that exist as consultants where you could just hire them to manage the projects or to bring the vendors together in order to bid on a project.
Okay. So I understand that there are people that will do this kind of work, just to the anonymous attendee. There are some people that will take this on as a project manager. I couldn't give you a referral right now, but I can tell you that there are people that will do this. So they'll deal with it like a construction manager and they'll manage it over time. The key, I think, is what you said, is to make sure that I mean, you can always use your contractor, but I think you want to objective opinion and someone who's going to manage on behalf of the association. So that does make sense. Okay, let's go to the next question here. And where are we? Okay, so I refreshed and can you comment on attack vents that close when a fire is present?
Um, Attic vents. Yes. I
or attic. It says attic
Yes,
though.
attic. Um, I have not seen too much information about them because I think the standard right now is having um, the 1/8 inch mesh over any sort of vents that are on the exterior of the home. And that is apparently that like that's the standard that I'm aware of. So I'm, from my understanding, the attic vents sense the heat, the radiant heat coming, and then they close completely. But things can fail, right? Like maybe it doesn't work. Whereas I think the mesh over the vents is the most effective method right now. But I would definitely recommend checking out Firewise website or Cal Fire's website on that.
Yeah, yeah, and they do have those, so it's worth looking into, I think, and a good investment. Okay, next question here is anonymous attendee, and can you comment on huge redwood trees planted in HOA common areas that are on the common area side of the fence and homeowners' yards? Uh, who does the maintenance? What's the fire risk? Wind blowing branches and debris? What the just I think
Yeah.
generally, is it a good idea to have a redwood, and how do you manage it so that everybody gets a crack at it and gets the benefit of it? I also
Yes.
had the question when I was in Santa Cruz about duff and the critters that live in a duff, and what do you do about that? Do you clean it up or you get rid of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a site-specific question. I'm thinking if a redwood was planted in a common area, it's most likely grass or landscaped and not like a natural duff redwood grove that we might find in Santa Cruz. But the biggest challenge for redwoods is making sure they have adequate water. They are a species that loves a lot of water. They're growing naturally on the coast, get a lot of water from the fog. So making sure that the planting location is sustainable, not only just having that irrigation in place, but then also having some mulch around the tree. That's something definitely to keep in mind when selecting a planting location. Is it safe to have mulching here without the risk of, fire? Are we 5 feet from a building or not? They do need to be pruned. Redwoods, they have a conical shape, right? So most of the pruning that is occurring is reducing on the ends and selectively pruning the interior to make sure that there's not too many crossing branches or dead wood. You would not want to do any sort of like cutting from the top. You want to make sure that that central leader is still allowed to grow straight up. But I think redwoods are unfortunately have not been planted so often in the last 20 years or so because they do require water. And being in a drought-prone state, people were working away from them, but they are such an important part of the California landscape that if you're going to spend money on irrigation anyway, you might spend it on a redwood tree. So I'd be interested in hearing more about that one. But in terms of duff, or like looking at a redwood forest, if your homeowners association or home was in a redwood forest, it is a little bit more intensive. This duff and buildup of the natural needles can go back 100 years. I would not recommend removing that unless it's actually touching your home. And it is critical. It needs to kind of remain at the base of the redwoods. That is the natural mulching that's occurring in the forest, right? You don't need to mulch a forest. It does it itself. So that would be a good question, like for a forester, urban forest manager, someone on site that could look, be a little bit more selective.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that the same is true coming from the wildlife side of it, ecology. That once you start removing dead branches and removing duff and what have you, you mess with the ecosystem, and so you don't have the small critters, microbes, and then the invertebrates, and which are food sources for neotropicals and what have you, birds and what have you. So
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's very it's a great responsibility that we have to take on how are we caring for our ecosystems? How are we caring for the urban forest or at the true forest. So making sure that a sustainable plan is put in place anytime development is being done in a forest setting.
Yeah, it's really it's a question of risk management to an extent as well. Is that how much risk are you willing to have? Because we have a lot of HOAs because the community is afraid fire's going to wipe them out, that they're going into 100% hardscape and removing plants from their
Hmm.
and that too can be, the pluses and minuses with that, but it's also very difficult. And it has an impact on the groundwater as well, which is problematic. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's go to the next question here, and it's from Marcia again, and or not, this is a different Marcia. How can you tell? Let me see here. How can you tell if the people actually doing the cutting are qualified compared with the boss? Okay, so
Hmm.
what do you have that demonstrates
Um,
what they're doing?
well, I would definitely ask your vendor about um, safety requirements that are taking place. If their crews are not wearing proper PPE or have proper gear, that's going to definitely set off a red flag. Um, Marcia, I would love to get you. I have a specific like safety requirement that I'm trying to remember the name of right now, but there are certain like ongoing continuing education credits that tree care vendors or tree trimmers, climbers, and so on need to fulfill. So that would be something, but making sure that your vendors are TCIA tree care industry certified is going to be huge. And then that D49, C49 licensing is going to be critical as well. Companies that have that do need to, have a certain worker class to be certified to prune the trees.
Yeah, and be very careful about the liability side of things. That's a great question because that is a problem in the industry. Sometimes when you get the cheapest bid, you're also getting someone who's not fully licensed and bonded and what have you. You need to make sure that that is done. The HOA and has been held culpable for workers' compensation if a contractor comes on and they don't have the appropriate compensation and they are sued. They're also sued. So good to have some liability insurance as well when you start hiring folks. Make sure they're professional. A lot of landscape companies out there contract with arborists to have an arborist. They do the regular land care and they blow and cut and whatever. But when it comes to trees, it's a different type of license that they need in an entirely different skill set. So beware of that as well. If you have a lot of very valuable trees, and trees have value, they're anywhere from 3,500 to $20,000 for per tree, depending on where it is and what type of tree. So it's worth looking at, and it's an important investment. I know, and I'm on my board of directors, and I know we have tree issues all the time where people want to see better because we have a view, and the trees grow up and block, and that's a problem. So we're always debating these, and one of the things the law does say, unless there's something specific in your titles, there's no expected preservation of the view, and
Mhm.
so people are sort of in a pickle when it comes to the trees that were little babies when they moved in are now blocking the view, and they want to get rid of those cute little trees that were growing at one point. So there's a lot of things packed in there. Managing trees, and the reason we have a tree expert on today is, and we've asked others, is because it's not the same as just doing landscaping. It's a different sort of discipline. Okay, and I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, absolutely. I did just want to say, like trees are alive, like they are our neighbors as well. So we do need to take proper care of them. And especially in the face of worsening like climate change and climate disasters, having good, healthy trees around your home that are properly pruned, are properly managed, this is going to help us with carbon sequestration, cooling our homes and heat events. Like there's a number of things we're not just trying to, prune them because potentially a wildfire is coming, but we're trying to live with the trees for the long term in a sustainable way. So thank you, Dave.
Yeah, you bet. And Wendy, we're going to go to Wendy Rasmussen's question here. There doesn't appear to be a specific compliance deadline outlined in Government Code 51182 for properties newly designated as being within a very high fire hazard severity zone. This seems to suggest that compliance with 100-foot defensible space is required as soon as the designation becomes official and is adopted by a local agency or city. Am I missing anything regarding this compliance issue?
That is a great question, Wendy, and I don't know the answer, but I would just really recommend you reach out to your local fire department. They should have staff like certified wildfire mitigation specialists or vegetation managers that could answer that question for you, whether or not they've been to your property. They would know that.
Yeah, you might, just you might want to talk to your HOA Association General Counsel just to get clarity on that because the fire department will tell you one thing, but the interpretation may be different than what you want, and you may be able to defend yourself some other way. So it's good to ask that question. I don't know the answer, but it's a really great question, and we have a bunch of Ask the Attorneys coming up. We have a couple coming up soon. And I'd encourage you to, if you don't want to ask your general counsel, you can also ask the attorneys at any one of those meetings. Some are Zoom, some are in person. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Anonymous attendee says, with yards that have a wooden fence within 5 feet, the yards in the HOA should not have any trees or bushes. So they want to know about the clearance.
Hmm.
That sound right? 5 feet, is that right? Between
That's
buildings? Okay.
That's correct. So, 0 to 5 feet from a home or built structure even. So that's going to be your home. And if you have a wooden deck that's attached to that, it's going to include the deck. And if you have a porch or carport or something that's attached, that's going to include that as well. So 0 to 5 feet, is going to be, pretty much getting down to bare soil or gravel at that point.
Okay, so I'm going to just take a couple more here and then we'll move into the close. So let's go to the anonymous attendee again. If not outside scope of topic today, and we'll see, can an HOA utilize a drone to monitor backyards in the HOA for higher risks, e.g., dead trees, brushes, and tall grass, that kind of thing? Can you use a zone? So that's sort of an invasion of privacy question, right?
Yeah, I would say definitely check with legal and the manager. I have outside of HOA management, I have heard of insurance companies using drones
Mhm.
to check for tree trimming and vegetation management. And they're not asking anyone, like they're not asking an HOA or a homeowner to do it. They are just doing it as part of their annual inspection. So yeah, I think at an HOA level, that would be a good conversation for your property manager or legal.
So on that drone, does it have big letters, Big Brother, right? Something like that. So
Probably.
that's you should be very, very careful about that from a practical perspective because there is privacy and an expectation of privacy. So just be very careful if you want to do it, if you think you have problems or whatever that you need to do something like that as an association board, then that's a different deal. But I think I think Kate, you're right on the button there. Make sure that you ask your attorney for guidance on that. Even putting cameras in hallways and entrances to buildings and things like that. That too has some very, very serious implications to HOAs, and you need to be very careful about how you proceed with those. So enough on that one. Let's do one more here. And the next question has three upvotes, and we're going to go to with respect to LA fires, I understand FireWise action does not particularly help an association obtain insurance? Please comment.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a huge, we could do a whole other presentation about this, right? So, from my understanding, the California Insurance Commissioner, and I advise you all to go on that website, they are trying to mandate having a return of insurance coverage throughout the state of California by different insurance providers. Um, the insurance companies, they don't have to uh, continue coverage or extend coverage just because you are doing defensible space. That really turns the question on as not necessarily insurance, but more so protecting your property and protecting lives. So while it's valuable to have all these documentation showing what projects have been done before and after, and then being able to provide that to insurance companies to say, look at all this work we've done, please continue to cover us. It is not currently required.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'm going to chime in a little bit here because we've done a lot of Firewise and FireSafe programs, and in the causation, there's no causation there. So if you do Firewise, it doesn't cause necessarily that you're going to get insurance. So,
Mhm.
but it is a case. So you're making your case, just like if you replace your panels and make sure you have the right panels, or if you do clear vegetation and you show people that you change out your fences from wood to paper, or to paper to from wood to metal, things like that. You're always making an improvement, and most insurance companies, when you really talk to them, they're about selling insurance. They're about selling fire insurance or liability insurance, but they want to make sure that the HOA board is paying attention to what's going on in the community. So this is just one more thing that you can use to compel it. Insurance companies do want to sell insurance. They want to stay in business so that they can get their deposits up so they can make money on the deposits. So it's one thing. I don't know if we thought that maybe some insurance agencies would give a discount if you do Firewise, and maybe there are now. I haven't checked in more than a year, but it's just one more thing that you have to make your case. And frankly, it'll be dependent on the algorithms that the insurance companies are using too, and their risk tolerance in certain zones, because they will insure a certain amount, but that'll be ascribed a specific risk of your property, and then they'll take so many that are a little higher risk and so many that are lower risk, and it sort of averages out. So there's a lot of actuarial stuff that goes on with insurance, but there's no compelling. Now, of course, Firewise is part of the National Fire Protection or Fire Protection Association's program, and so it's an association. It's not government. So that's the other side to this coin. But anyway, I want to say thanks to Kate. So, Kate, thank you so much for coming today and leading us on this interesting exploration of trees and how trees help the communities and potentially create some issues with the community. Is certainly an expensive proposition to manage those trees correctly, but they add a tremendous amount of value to the homes in the community and actually just community enjoyment, which is what we try to do in our HOAs, and that's what we teach with Echo and trying to help communities grow and prosper. So I also want to say thank you to all of our Echo members for coming today and supporting our ongoing Echo webinars. For those of you who are not Echo members, please consider becoming an Echo member and supporting HOA boards throughout the country. To join, simply go to www.echo-ca.org and click on the membership tab. Echo is a membership-based philanthropic association. We're a 501c6, but we spend a good deal of our time trying to help communities improve their lot in life and provide an objective resource. So please consider joining Echo. For Echo members, again, thank you for supporting us, and please invite your friends, boards, and especially management firms and vendors to join Echo. Sometimes it just takes a nudge from you to invite them to become a member of Echo, and often they will. If you would like to become more involved with Echo, please consider joining our volunteer corps, a new corps. We just started this about a year ago. As part of our volunteers, you will have an opportunity. You'll have a few opportunities where we could use a little extra help. Please refer to the slides. If you see anything that looks interesting to you, please send me an email at dzaponi@echo-ca.org. I'm going to be looking for people that are interested in writing articles and also maybe booklets or helping edit booklets as we build our base of materials. And Kate, you might be interested in helping out with that too. We have a lot of opportunities there. And now for our other announcements, we have a few here. The Echo HOA University has an educational program focused on HOA board preparedness. The core curriculum of 10 courses is designed for high quality training and is available for HOA board members, interested homeowners, and professionals. Your participation in this program will earn you the certificate of HOA board member preparedness. It's a total of 29 and a half hours of class time. And you can take the classes live online. And most of the courses are recorded, so you can also do it on demand. And so it makes it very nice. Two of the courses are required to be in person and live. I'm not in person, but live online. And one is ethics because we talk about specific issues with respect to ethics. And then I do the capstone myself to talk about living and working in the HOA world. So it covers everything. It's more of a macroeconomic course. If you or someone you know wants to enroll in the certification program, please send an email to Connor. He'll set you up. His email address is now on the screen. I think it's on the screen. As we move into the summer, here's the preview of our resource panels upcoming in August, and I think we have one or two in July too. So anyhow, Sacramento Resource Panel is Tuesday, August 5th this month, and we'll be talking about landscaping. I think the focus is going to be a lot on the on functional turf, but we'll talk about other things too. The Echo Club at Rossmore or TCAR is going to be talking about budgeting and reserve studies and resources needed. I think they call it a kit for budgeting and resource studies. So that one was secured and ready to go. And the East Bay Resource Panel over in San Ramon is going to be talking about budget season toolbox. And so that's another one, very similarly to TCAR. Los Angeles Resource Panel down here, we hold it in Burbank. It just got going this year. It's doing very well. How to prepare a budget for the budget season. Again, I think there's a theme here. Orange County Resource Panel is on reserve studies. And then San Diego Resource Panel on Thursday will be how to prepare for a roofing project. Now, that's a good one if you have roofing issues and in particular, if you want roofs that are fire resistant or retardant, this is a very good one. I think the presenter is going to talk a little bit about metal roofings and the availability of non-flammable roofs. We also have two larger in-person events that are planned for the rest of this year. One is in October in Southern California at the Laguna Hills Community Center on October 10th. And then it's theme, Who's Responsible? And so that's always a fun one. And then our legislative update in NorCal seminar is November 15th, 2025. And we look forward to seeing you all there. That's always a big one. That's at Rossmore as well in the event center. They have a very large event center there. So thank you again, Kate, for being here and presenting about tree care and defensible space. And of course, thanks to all of you for attending today and making this a successful event. Echo appreciates your investment in education to foster a better quality of life in HOA communities.